Just a little note. I don't have my notes with me, but I want to go over this image. Okay, what is this? Okay, this is where in older translations, these are what are called the grapes of wrath. These are what's called the grapes of wrath. And there's two major American pieces of literature that take note of this image. One is a novel by Steinbeck called The Grapes of Wrath. The other is the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out his vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. Okay. Little known fact about the Battle Hymn of the Republic, it was written during the time of the Civil War for President Lincoln. Okay. Now, I don't have my notes with me, so I can't tell you the exact, I don't want to tell you something and then bring it back. But if I'm not mistaken, it was a song to encourage or rally the Union troops that they were on the right side, that they were trampling out the vintage of the scourge of slavery in the United States. And that's how this got interpreted back then. Okay? I will confirm that when I get my notes too. But I believe that's what it was. And so it became known as the Battle Hymn of the Republic, to preserve the Union. And part of preserving the Union was this idea that we're going to stamp out the injustice of slavery in the United States. So the grapes of wrath that are talked about here and the bloodbath that comes from it is the whole Civil War that has come about. Very interesting way how an American spin on this. Now Steinbeck in his Grapes of Wrath is a totally different kind of thing. Okay? Totally different theme. Okay? Dust Bowl during the Depression. Okay? Right? So it's interesting that there are these two great American spins on this image that come from this part and only this part in the book of Revelation. This is the only part where you'll see this. Okay? So the question is, what is actually being presented here? What is actually being presented here? Well, in a preliminary kind of reading, this image evokes a lot of the imagery that Jesus uses in the Gospels, particularly in Matthew chapter 13. So we can go there and take a look at that. Matthew chapter 13. Matthew chapter 13 is the section in Matthew's Gospel where Jesus gives all of his parables about the kingdom. There are always parables about the kingdom. Jesus came and established his kingdom on the earth. Okay? The kingdom is in present form, still on the earth, but not in its fullness. What is the kingdom? It's the church. To be sure, it's the church. Is it fully realized? No. It's still hidden, but it's here and it's visible. So Matthew, I'm going to look at one parable in particular. Matthew chapter 13, verse 24. And it's a familiar parable, but I want you to see how this connects to this image in the book of Revelation. It's not entirely perfect, but you get the same imagery. All right? a similar imagery. So here it is. Another parable he put before them, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds also appeared. And the servants of the householder came to him, saying, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then it has weeds? What's going on? And he said to them, An enemy has done this. The servant said to him, Then do you want us to go and gather them? But he said, No, lest in gathering the weeds you root up the wheat along with them. Let them both grow together until the harvest. At the harvest time, I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first, bind them into bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. Okay? Now, how does this relate to that image in the book of Revelation? Well, first let's get the understanding of this parable. The disciples didn't understand what he was talking about. So they asked him, Can you explain this parable to us, Lord? And he said, Sure. So jump down to verse 36. Then he left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples came to him, saying, Explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field. Okay? I always find it interesting that the crowds never asked him to explain these parables. So he never does. But when the disciples get up enough gumption to say, all right, I don't understand this, I'm just going to ask. Okay, Jesus, we don't get it. Can you explain it to us? You know what he does? He explains it. You don't ask, you don't get. He didn't say, no, fellas, figure it out. No. He didn't want them, struggling. And thank goodness they did, otherwise it would never be in here. We'd probably still be wondering about it. But listen to how Jesus interprets the parable. He said, He who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. Who's that? Jesus. He's the Son of Man. He said, I'm the sower of the good seed. The field is the world. And the good seed means the sons of the kingdom. And the weeds are the sons of the evil one. Did you hear that? Doesn't that sound like what we've been reading in the book of Revelation? This distinction between the seed of the woman, those who follow God and keep his commandments, and the seed of the evil one. Jesus just tells it straight up. Okay? And the enemy who sowed them is the devil. So in case you wondered who's the evil one, he just says it. The harvest is the close of the age, and the reapers are angels. Now you're seeing the connection. Keep reading. Just as the weeds are gathered and burned with fire, so it will be at the close of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all evildoers. Did you hear that? At the end of time, God is going to purify his church of sin and the evildoers that's in the church. Until then, we can expect evil men to be in the church. He told us that that's how it's going to be. So stop being surprised. Until the end of time comes, that's how it's going to be. So live with it and move on and trust God that he knows what he's doing. The Son of Man will send his angels. They will gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all evildoers and throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear. Now, take that understanding and go back to Revelation 14. Now, with that parable, he talked about wheat and weeds. In this image that we see a sickle, and a sickle is used for harvesting. And in case you missed it, it talked about harvesting in it. And another angel came out of the temple. He had a sharp sickle. Another angel came out of the altar. The angel who had power over fire called with a loud voice to him, "Put your sickle and gather the cluster of the vine of the earth, for its grapes are ripe." And the angel swung its sickle to the earth and gathered the vintage of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and the blood flowed from the winepress as high as the horse's bridle. So this is an image using grapes and a winepress to talk about that day in which God will pour out, or if you will, squeeze out the evil from the earth. This is the great winepress of the wrath of God. This is not the good seed. Okay? This is the fruition of the evil that's in the earth, because it's treading down, it's pressed out. It's the, like I said, the winepress of the wrath of God. So in terms of, and I forget the name of the gal who wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic, but this is what was being trampled out in the great Republic of the United States during the Civil War. That's how she took it and meant it and used this image to help support, because it's such a graphic image of supporting the Republic side, the Union side of this war. Okay? So, that's the image that's being brought out here. It's an image of the end of time in which God is dealing with the evil that's in the earth. And he's doing it in terms of this, the grapes are ripe, it's time to reap it, and we make the wine of God's wrath out of it. Okay? Yes? No, of course not. We should always speak out against evil and injustice in the church and outside of the church. It doesn't mean sit by and let it happen. No, that's not it at all. There's no room for passivity or quietism. Right. Right. Of course. Correct. You're reminding me of something that's very, to illustrate what you're talking about, this speaking up and so forth. And I always mix it up, but I believe it was Catherine of Genoa who was called by God to go to the true Pope, who was living in Avignon, France at the time. And she went to him, got an audience, which in of itself is a miracle, and she basically said, you need to get out of here, you're in the wrong place, you need to go back to Rome. The popes had been living there for almost 100 years. I mean, to this day, you can go to Avignon, France, and see the papal palace. And if I'm not mistaken, and I've said this before, and until I find otherwise, while she was speaking with the Pope, she began to levitate in front of him. In front of the College of Cardinals, too, that were around him. And and she just kept speaking.
I think it's Catherine or Siena.
You might be right. I always mix it up if it's Genoa or Siena. You may be, you're probably right. But the point is, because of this miraculous event, the Pope, when she finally levitated back down, he said, I'm going back to Rome. And he did. And the papacy has been back in Rome ever since. But the point is, they were living in, he was the legitimate Holy Father, but he was in the wrong place. And it took this act of God to bring him back into his proper place. So yes, we should speak out. Yes, against injustice and so forth. And again, I'm thinking of like St. Joan of Arc. She was condemned in a church court and burned at the stake as a witch, and then later exonerated when you realize that this was all a kangaroo court. This was all a plot. It was all a political ploy. Because she was tried by English bishops, and she was French. And so they just realized that, you know, this was all wrong, and she's a saint, and we don't know those names that condemned her. You know what I'm saying? And the point is, when you act like the church, when you are a saint, you just go on this way and God deals with that. You speak his words and let God deal with it. If they don't hear you, that's on them. But you don't not speak. Does that make sense? Okay? Yes, you point out the weeds. Yes. Sure. Yes. Yes. You know, and we trust that God is still in control of his church, and he knows what he's doing, and he raises up saints to bring the justice back into his church. Yes? Okay. I think this is a good place to stop. We went through all of